thank you so much for joining us. This is Dolphins Detail. We've been doing our down to the detail series, but now we're gonna mix things up. The draft is just a week away, and we thought this would be a perfect time for our first show and to bring in our first guest. Excuse me. So joining Marek and myself is the one and only Brian Cat. You can follow him on Twitter at BrianCatNFL. Kat, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, man. You've been a good friend of mine for about 5 6 years here, so I appreciate you taking the time and joining us.
Well, it's an honor to be with you here on your first show. And yeah, I know we met at Web Weekend here. Gosh, it probably was that the who'd they play that year? I think the Chargers or the Texans, one of those two.
Though, were you at both of those? Because I was
I was
at
at
both of
I
those.
was at both of them. So yeah, and those were blowout Dolphins wins. So I have great luck when I go to games. Not so much with jerseys, but with
Now we got to
games.
talk about that. We got to talk about that, Cat, because I'm a big jersey collector myself. I think I just counted the other day. I'm up to 46 jerseys, and I have a jersey curse myself. I've heard you have a jersey curse. It feels like every time I wear a player's jersey on game day, they have a terrible game that week. It got to the point last year where I didn't even wear a jersey for the playoff game in hopes of a miraculous win, and it almost happened. So that almost like reinforced the idea that I am cursing my favorite team, the Miami Dolphins. Like, tell me a little bit about your curse, Cat.
I don't think anyone can one up me on jerseys. In 2012 or 2013, I bought a custom made Jonathan Martin jersey. I'm
No,
not
you
joking.
didn't.
I'll
No, you.
post it later. I'll post it later. And the
Why did
reason
you do that?
I didn't even like him all that much, but the reason was because I thought he was so important to the Dolphins at the time because Ryan Tannehill was quarterback, needed to be protected. They had Jake Long, they had Richie Incognito, they had Mike Pouncey, and I thought if Jonathan Martin shores up the right side of that line, they're going to be phenomenal on
So
in
wait,
pass protection.
do you have a Jake Long jersey?
I don't know.
Do you have a Mike Pouncey jersey?
No,
Do you have a Richie Incognito jersey?
no, that'd be a nice one to get, but
So,
no.
so of the four that you thought were so important to protect Ryan Tannehill, you went with Jonathan Martin.
And I wrote an article on it bragging about buying the jersey and why.
Oh
So
man.
I also
So
have Deion Jordan.
okay.
I also bought two custom made uh, Minka Fitzpatrick and Laramie Tunsil jerseys in
Ugh.
2019.
Okay, so I'll allow the Laramie Tunsil because he is the architect of this rebuild. I also have a Minka Fitzpatrick jersey that I bought at the stadium when I went to Bears at Dolphins. I think it was during Minka's rookie year, and I was like, "Oh man, he's so good. He's going to be great for us for a long time." Snagged the jersey, and then we all know he got traded. My most dishonorable jersey. I went to. I live in Iowa, so not a Florida Dolphins fan, but I went to Miami on my honeymoon, and we went down to the stadium, went to the pro shop, and I was talking to the dude working the counter at the pro shop, and he said, "Oh, where are you from?" And I'm like, "I'm from Iowa," and that was the year they had just drafted Matt Roth from Iowa. And he goes, "Oh, well, you need a Matt Roth jersey. I can make it for
Oh
you
no.
custom right now." And I was like, "Sweet." He's like, "What size do you wear?" I'm like, I wear a large." He makes me a double XL Matt
Yikes!
Roth jersey, custom, doesn't fit. I've never actually worn it for a game or anything, mainly because it didn't fit at first. And then, because he's an absolute psychopath. So many Matt Roth stories up here in Iowa, by the way, that are like 10 times worse than any of the stories you hear from his time with the Dolphins. But that's my most dishonorable Dolphins jersey purchase was Matt Roth.
I think that was 2005. Roth was drafted.
Yep.
That's crazy.
It was Ronnie. That was the Ronnie Brown year. Yeah, I remember that. I thought he was going to be a good player, and then yeah, it just didn't happen.
Kat, I want to ask you, when you look at that Jonathan Martin jersey, can you tell me, like, what's the first thing you think about, like, if you're looking at that anytime in the last 3 years? Is there an initial thought? Because I mean, so many silly might not even be the right word. That was such a very weird time with the Dolphins. Joe Philbin was a mess. All these there were different personalities. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that was a frustrating time there. I mean, really, and not just for Jonathan Martin, but I have my own thoughts on the whole Bullygate scandal that we don't
Yeah.
need to get into. But the it was just so mediocre from 2012 to 2014 with Philbin, and 2014, I really thought the Dolphins were starting to, we're going to get in the playoffs, and they finished 8-8 and blew like 3 fourth quarter leads in the last like minute. Yeah, it was frustrating. So, you know, I, eh, to me, it's more frustrating to go through a season like 2019. I mean, 2019 was nothing. It was more frustrating to go through a season like last year, where the Dolphins, we're 8-3, and we really think something special is going to happen, and then they drop 5 in a row, and then have to back into the playoffs. But the good thing is, it's a good roster, and I'm looking forward to this year for sure, and this draft.
I just before we
Before
get.
oh, hold on.
Oh, you go ahead.
I had to ask about this poster you got framed on the back here. Is that St. Louis Cardinals?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I live in St. Louis,
Oh, cool.
and actually, my neighbor was throwing it away, so I got it for free. I took it off there.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Trash day, right? You just
yeah,
go and snag
I
it.
I need to have both Dolphin stuff. I need to get that moved around, but yeah, that's
Hey,
I live in
you've
St.
had more
Louis.
luck. You've had more luck being a Cardinals fan than a Dolphins fan, that's for sure.
Yeah, I guess I could say I'm a Cardinal. See, I only watch football. That's the thing. I'll go to a Cardinal game, but I only watch football. They were asking me about sports today at work, and they didn't realize I only watch football. So they asked about this Mets pitcher who's from St. Louis. I forget his name even now, but yeah, I football's it for me. But I live in St. Louis, and then on draft day, I don't know if you've seen the show Ozark.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
I've got a condo down at the Lake of the Ozarks,
Oh
right,
nice.
right where Ruth, the main character, lived in Osage Beach. So every year
That's
I
so
go
cool.
down there, just myself and my dog, and we watch the draft for 3 days, drink,
Wow.
fish, watch the draft, come back home to my wife and kid. It's the only weekend I have completely to myself.
That
What made you
sounds like
start
the
that trend?
life.
My my wife and I realized I was pretty useless around here anyway during draft weekend, so I might as well just not be here. So
I love it. I love it. And something we try to do with this show, and something we try to do with another Dolphins podcast, is the fact St. Louis, Iowa, Massachusetts, there's so many different Dolphin fans out there. And before we get into the draft, I just want to talk about Web Weekend real quick, because that was such a great opportunity. Basically, for everyone out there who doesn't know, Web Weekend, the Miami Dolphins would invite all the, I guess, blog sites to come and hang out. We went to the Chargers game where I think Joe Philbin's dad passed away like a week before, and the Dolphins came out and just dominated the Chargers. I think it started with was that the no Houston was the Rashad Matthews like 70-yarder to the house to begin. So
Yeah,
so
that was Rashard Matthews on the first drive for 50 something. Then Jarvis Landry had that touchdown where he ran all the way across the field.
yeah.
And then you had the Rashad Jones interception flip into the end zone. It was 42 nothing Dolphins at the beginning of the second quarter, which we just could not believe it.
Especially the Dolphins being such a mediocre team. And my last note about that Chargers game, that day, I want to get your odds on this. That day, we went to the Dolphins game. We left like midway through the fourth because it was like over. We go to the Heat game. And we take a taxi, we get to the Heat game. We asked the taxi driver, what's the best way to get out of here? This was a little before Uber, a little before Lyft. We got the same exact taxi driver in the middle of Miami going to and from the Miami Heat game. Can you tell me the odds of that? Because it was
Mm,
absolutely bananas that he looked at us. He's like, "Yeah, I was just with people at the Dolphins game," and then he looked at us and we were like, "This is crazy. This
Yeah,
is
not
insane."
not good. I've never had the same taxi driver. I've never had the same Uber driver. Nothing like that. So yeah, that's pretty crazy.
All right. Let's get into it here. So, Kat, give me a little background why you invest so much time into the draft. I've heard over the years you just had the thickest binders full of just all the different notes you take, and they're great to kind of have it and look back on for years. So what really motivated you to start getting into all that work and investing all this time in the draft?
Yeah, I always love the draft. It's a culmination of college football season, um, NFL roster building, all of it. And I really do think teams are made through the draft. Maybe not for the Dolphins with all the picks they're trading away, but I it's just a incredible weekend where it all you see it, you see all the work come together, and there are a lot of surprises and everything. And I this is my 26th year watching every pick come off the board. And what I do is during the season I try to watch it like a just normal fan,
Mhm.
and just and n- after that I rely on, because when I back in the 90s, I there was Mel Kiper, there was a couple other guys, and that was it. Now
Mhm.
there's like 20 draft nicks who I have a lot of respect for. So I depend on them with their big boards to kind of set the table. And then for after that point, I try not to look at who's moving up, who's moving down. I'd like to draw my own opinion from there, but I'm lucky enough to work from home, so I've got 3 TVs on next to me all the time. So I create a YouTube playlist of about 150, 200 players with 3 to 5 games. It takes a few weeks to set that up, so that in the background, at least, there's always something going on for
Mhm.
3 or 4 months with the draft. And I try to have that guide everything. And you got the combine numbers and all that good stuff too. That it's just a puzzle that you put together throughout, and I've really always enjoyed it.
What started you on this path? Like what got you so interested in the NFL draft? You said 26 years ago?
Yeah, 1998 was the first draft. I really uh, I thought it was interesting just projecting players physically going from college football with what they did to the NFL, and how wrong people are so often. I mean, you've got people who this is their job, and you could basically flip a coin with somebody who's just picking names, and you're almost going to get the same odds. But it's talking through the players and what they're good at, and how you expect them to project to the next level. That has always interested me.
As you go through this, I have to imagine there are different trends that develop. I'm not the biggest draft guy. I'm not even close. Just growing up in the Northeast, I just think that there was never those big colleges around us, and it's such an environment sport where it's when you go to the tailgate, it's like a whole day event. So this year, I hear that there's a couple trends. One, that there's a lot of really small wide receivers. That was kind of the one that sticks out. But when you look at this group specifically, is there anything that maybe stands out? Not necessarily in terms of what the Dolphins are going to be looking for, but just kind of as a group, you're like, wow, maybe something's missing.
It's really dictated by the 4 quarterbacks at the top. I mean, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. I mean, you see some mock drafts where they're their first 4 picks of the draft. And
Mhm.
now you're hearing, as the draft's approaching, Bryce Young could go number 1 to the Panthers. And if he does, the Texans may go away from quarterback completely. And if it does, that sends the entire draft into a tailspin, especially in the top 10. So as far as each position has an interesting story. You got the quarterbacks at running back, and this does reflect on the Dolphins a little bit. You've got Bijan Robinson at the top, who's going to be a first round pick. You have Jameer Gibbs, who's going to go in the second round, and then you have, in my opinion, 16 to 18 running backs who are worth being drafted in the first 5 rounds. Now, if you look back in the last like 5 or 6 years, there are times where you don't have that many running backs drafted in the entire 7 rounds. So
Right.
there's a lot of depth at running back. There's very little separating, in my opinion, the third guy from like the 17th guy, though. So that's gonna, when you get Dolphins get down to the 6th and 7th round, that's gonna be interesting. Wide receiver, yeah, a
Hold
lot of
real
small
quick though,
guys.
real quick, Pat. You talked about 6th and 7th round for the Dolphins drafting running back. So you don't see that happening with either of the Dolphins picks in the second or third round. Is that based on Chris Grier's history of not drafting running backs high, or is there something else with that idea you have there?
Yeah, I don't think, if we're talking about what I think will happen, I don't think the Dolphins will draft a running back in the second or third round because of that history, and because they also re-signed Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. I know they're veterans, but it was a productive rushing attack when they actually committed to it last year. Myself, if it's what I'm doing in the second round, if Jamar Gibbs from Alabama falls down to pick 51, it's the odds are he won't, but there's a chance he could. Um, uh, he is he's somebody that's really high on my list. Somebody who runs a 4.35 and really is almost indistinguishable from Alvin Kamara when you watch him, as far as what
Okay,
he brings
sure.
to both the running game and the passing game. A little bit undersized, but explosive, makes every yard count as far as how he sets up defenders and what he can bring in the passing game, as well as running up the middle.
Is there another running back you like for the Dolphins at 51 if Jameer Gibbs isn't there? Maybe like a Zach Charbonnet or even like an Israel Abanikanda, somebody like that?
My third running back for the Dolphins would be Tyjae Spears
Okay.
from Tulane. He is. It's real simple for me at running back. Bijan Robinson goes in the first. I would love Jameer Gibbs in the second, or I would love Tyjae Spears in the third. After that, I'm not. I prefer to try to get a pick in the fourth or fifth round. Maybe come away with a Damian Pierce like steal
Mhm.
in this draft this year. But I don't see a lot separating now. Zach Charbonnet. A lot of other people are higher on him than I am. This is somebody who gosh, 4 years ago at Michigan. I mean, he was Michigan. He almost ran for 1,000 yards 4 years ago at Michigan in Brian Flores' first year with the team. That's how long he's been in college football. But he's a very good runner, very productive runner. He transferred to UCLA. I think he's a little bit laggy for this scheme that prefers more of a one cut type of runner. That's to me what Tyjae Spears brings to the table, and a couple of other running backs too.
Okay.
The things I really like about Spears and Gibbs, and please step on me if you sense the wrong vibe here, but the Dolphins are going to play against a lot of loose boxes, right? You're going to have safeties deep, and there's going to be a lot of speed on the outside. You kind of need someone who can be prepared for all the landmines that are in a secondary, because while someone like I think a Zach Chardonnay would be interesting, I don't know if he'd be as successful against a weaker box when his goal to get around people isn't barreling through a guy when it's like a pip drill, but instead you got to cut around them like you mentioned. So to me, I think that's why the speedy guys make a little more sense. But am interested how like a Charbonnet can kind of mask some issues, whether it's Teron Armstead missing some games, whether it's Austin Jackson, your right tackle. I do wonder if a more physical back can help kind of avoid some of the issues we saw last year.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. And if you're looking for somebody who's going to take a handoff and in the fourth quarter, he's gonna get more yardage for you. He's going to grind things out. Yeah, that's the guy that you want here at the top after Bijan Robinson. He's 5'10", 220 pounds. Also for a big back, really creative as well.
Mhm.
And not only and even though he's a big back, he has good hands too. So what I like about Gibbs and Spears is not only are they one cut runners and would make this offense even faster, but the Dolphins really need to take advantage this year of not just bombing the ball deep, take the underneath stuff more often. And I think that's got to come from the running back position. Jameer Gibbs has phenomenal hands. And Tyjae Spears during Senior Bowl week, this guy wowed everybody as a receiver. I mean, as a running back at Tulane in his final year, ran for almost 1,700 yards, 21 touchdowns. But he really wowed everybody and showed what he can do in the passing game too. So those are the top two guys on my board after Bijan.
So where are you going in the second round? Let's say the running back situation is just real awkward. If you had to choose, what should be Miami's? Actually, I'm gonna make it a two-parter. This is a complete Big J no-no. But who should the Dolphins go after in terms of you think could help the team the most? But who should the Dolphins go after in terms of we just saw Chris Grier today, or heard Chris Grier today talking about the fact we might take someone that isn't a need. We might take this depth. He mentioned how actually, I think it was Marvin Allen today mentioned how Channing Tindall and Eric Ezukoma were drafted as projects. So having that in mind, what are maybe those couple options there?
So yeah, I have a list of guys that I'd say hoping are going to fall to 51, and I would be even open to trading up for. Before that, I think it's uh, for your listeners, I think it's important to point out the guys that I think have no chance to fall to 51. There are
Right.
25 guys. I'll blast through them. You got the four quarterbacks. You got Bijan. You've got the top four receivers, which are uh, Jackson Smith and Jigma, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison. You've got the tight ends, Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid. You've got the tackles, Skaronski, Broderick Jones, um, Darnell Wright, and Paris Johnson. So four guys actually. You've got the five edge guys: Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Van Ness, Nolan Smith, Miles Murphy, and then you've got the top, or you've got Jalen Carter. You've got the top four cornerbacks: Devin Weatherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter, Deontay Banks. 25 guys who I say no chance to be there at 51.
Mhm.
And then at that point, there are four players I am hoping fall to 51. Would be elated with the pick. Number one it would be DeJuan Jones, the
Yeah.
tackle from
Yeah.
Ohio State, and
Big boy. Big boy.
very big boy. I mean, and there's some concerns with him. I mean, 6'8", listed at 355 during the year, but then he shows up to his to the combine at 375, then refuses to get on the scale at the pro day. So this guy could show up at 400 pounds and eat himself out of the league. But you're talking about somebody at that size, very nimble feet, a very good technician for being a right tackle, allowed 0 sacks and 5 quarterback hits at that size. If you're going to make one move and solve the Dolphins' biggest need in the second round, where you're almost picking in the third round, for Christ's sake, DeJuan Jones would be that guy. He may bust out
Yeah.
of the league, but I think the risk is so very much worth it.
Sounds
Um,
like we're kind of on the same wavelength there. I know you and I want offensive linemen in that second round, pick number 51. I think Jake would like to go somewhere else. Doesn't feel like it's as big of a need. So interesting dichotomy there between ideologies.
So I've talked about Gibbs as as a guy that is he's second on my list. Then then 3 and 4 here are not needs actually. My third guy's Mozzie Smith, the defensive
Okay.
tackle from Michigan, and
Yeah.
here's
There.
why: is
Another big boy.
yeah, another big boy, and you're talking about somebody 34 bench press reps, crazy play strength. He was number one on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. This guy, I'm surprised he only did 34 reps. He was benching over 300 pounds 20 plus times uh, before. I mean, you're talking.
Whew.
And it wouldn't be a big deal if he was just a weight room guy, but it shows up on the field. He can also his play strength is unreal, but he's also got some nimbleness in his lower body for being that big. And look, Christian Wilkins, I do think will be resigned, but you've also got Raekwon Davis and you've got Zach Sealer who are going to be free agents, and not really anything behind them. So
Mhm.
I think if you draft Mozzie Smith, he's going to get on the field a lot, and he is very easily going to take over one of the spots and be a very good, if not dominant, run defender here for this 3-4 scheme next year.
Yeah.
Speaking to the offensive line, Chris Grier today talking about how he expects Austin Jackson to be a starter. You mentioned a couple big boomer bust guys. Do you feel that the depth is there where you could be kind of comfortable like taking a big swing? Because the draft there's a couple different ways you can get the guy who's ready to play, but you can get the guy who's going to have 15 false starts in year one and just develop over time and smooth out those bumps. Do you feel that depth is there where they can kind of take that swing and maybe hurt a little bit at times with a tough pick?
At offensive tackle, no. At guard
Fair.
center, yes. And here's why: is that you've got, like I said, the top 4 tackles who are going to go in the top 20. Uh, Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, Darnell Wright, and Peter Skoronsky gone. And then you've got DeJuan Jones, who is consensusly the 5th guy. After that, Matt Bergeron from Syracuse, I like a lot.
I was
He's
just about to ask you about Bergeron.
Yeah, and so I kind of like him more as a guard, though. And he went up against Jared Versey from Florida State and had a lot of problems with him, but that's supposed to be a top 5 pick next year. But he struggled in a few games late. Um, but I watched the games other than that. He has a lot of clean tape, and he can get nasty in a more of a limited space area. So that's why I think at left guard, he makes a lot of sense. Lance Zierlein compared him. His comp for him was Joel Bitonio if he moves inside the left guard,
Okay.
which
That's
I think
good.
any of us would take that.
Yes.
But I view him as more of a guard. And then the other guys, I I mean, I despise the fact the Dolphins have Austin Jackson at the top of their depth chart right now at right tackle. But I think if any of these other guys, I don't think you're doing much better because it
Yeah.
falls off that much.
Oh, Jake, you're still muted.
Professional run operation we got going on here. I'm always caught off guard. Austin Jackson's still like one of the 2 youngest guys on this roster, and I want to get your thoughts on him because everyone is ready to jump off the cliff with Jackson. I think some people are also turned off by the fact he comes out and says like, "Hey, I think I can be a starting left tackle in this league." Is everybody so ready to give up? Is it just the idea of these last 15 years where just every lineman has been so bad and you see Adam Gase cut 3 guys and all of a sudden the line gets better and they go on a playoff run? Or I still just feel like there's a little bit of hope there that this dude's so young and he's still growing and can be that guy with a veteran like Tron Armstead leading the way.
And the short answer is he has never been good at blocking football players.
which
And-
which I don't know if you guys know this is literally the number one job of an offensive lineman is to block.
Let me tell you this. It, this goes back a while. Austin Jackson was out of in as long as I've been watching the draft, was the most shocked I ever was that a player was projected to go near the first round when he was at USC. And I'll tell you why. I watched 5 games of his when he was at USC. The first 3 games I watched were against draft players that were drafted that year. AJ Epinesa, who's with the Bills, Cora, who's with the Giants, and uh, Bradley and I, who was a 5th round pick that year. Austin Jackson got whipped by every single one of them. And those are the only 3 NFL caliber players he played that year. Now, he's a good athlete. He's 6'5", he's 320. I get that part, but his arms and his feet have always been a mess. They were at USC. They were in year one. They were in year two. He only played one game in year three, but I just it's just a general rule I have with offensive linemen is if you're for 2 years graded as like one of the worst players at your position, the odds of you turning it around are very, very unlikely. I feel that way about him, and I feel that way about Liam Eichenberg, even though I've got a little bit more hope for Eichenberg at guard.
You didn't mention Noah Benogany, so there's a lot of hope for him,
Oh
is what you're
gosh,
saying.
God, yeah, that was a pick at the time that I I thought was fascinating because I thought maybe the Dolphins know something other people don't. Well, they didn't. Uh,
Mhm.
this guy was barely 20 years old when he was drafted, Igbenogany,
Yeah.
and I always felt with him and Jack, it's one thing to draft a player that young if you've got this gargantuan upside to you, but I had never felt they did when they were drafted. That's why I didn't like those picks to begin with.
There was already the excuses right away with Igbenogany. It was like he's a small, but he can tackle. So they tried to kind of mask those issues. Um, I want to get some like late round darts, but before we get into that, can you kind of go walk us through like your ideal situation for the Dolphins draft in 2023? Basically, if it fell your way.
Yeah, and the fourth guy on my that was on my list that I don't think he'll be there, and he's the most unlikely to be there, but I think there's a chance is Brian Branch, the safety. And I know again defensive back, but I think he has a chance to fall to the second round. And the reason I say that is 190 pounds, or 4.58 in the 40, and in 3 years at Alabama, had a total of 3 interceptions and no forced fumbles. Like, if you're a GM, are you going to put your name on that pick, even though he does check a lot of boxes? I don't know. I think he falls there. And if you did, and you paired him with Javon Holland for the next 5, 6, 7 years, I think that's incredible, especially with everything else the Dolphins have in the secondary. My ideal scenario for the Dolphins is quite simple: is Dewan Jones falls to 51. It's unlikely he does, but because of the size and the weight, and he doesn't fit every scheme, there is an outside chance he does, or the Dolphins trade up just a little bit to get him, maybe trade a future pick. We'll see. And then in the third round, because there's such great depth at the interior of the offensive line, I see 4, 5, 6 players who, if they ended up falling late into the third round because they're interior linemen, I'm willing to double down on that. And let's really have some competition at left guard and right tackle. Chandler Zavala from North Carolina State is somebody I think has a realistic chance to be there. This is an interesting guy. He wasn't even invited to the combine, which
I
usually
was
means you're not
just
getting.
about to say, not even a combine invite.
And I usually roll my eyes at players like this when they kind of get back on the radar at the last minute. Um, but I watched him, and I've never seen a guard. I'm not gonna say never, but it's rare to see a guard fire off the snap the way that he does. He has such
Yes.
mobility, and that's
Yes.
so important on this team. And then also, or in the zone blocking scheme, it's so important. And you also look, he's 6 foot, 6'3", 6'4", 320 pounds. And at NC State, which faces decent competition, this guy allowed a pressure rate of less than 1% last year. So
Wow.
you combine all those things together, you get him in the third round, any plug and play starter potential in a season like this where there's so few starting spots and roster spots available would be a huge get.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
What about the sixth and seventh rounder? Let me word it this way: with those picks, is it more? Would you are there specific guys you're interested in, or would you rather try to use that stuff and maybe push up that second and third round pick just a little bit to make sure you get your guy? What would be your attack route there?
Yeah, think you sixth and seventh rounders, you're probably just going to make the pick. I mean,
Mhm.
you may move from 51 up to 48 if you trade the 6th round pick. I'd probably rather just keep it. And I hope the Dolphins find themselves in a spot where at 51 there are a handful of players we've talked about here that are available. Maybe they can fall back a few spots as a comparison. I mean, last year the Patriots traded up from 54 to 50 and took Tyquan Thornton. Chiefs took Sky Moore, but just for those 4 spots, they got a 5th round pick out of it. Is that the type of trade maybe the Dolphins can make without losing a lot? And I think that's something they may look into. But to answer your question, when you get down into the 6th, 7th round, running back is where I'm really looking because look, you're not going to have 25 running backs drafted in the first 5 rounds. So somebody is going to fall. And I think somebody of value could. Chris Rodriguez, a running back from Kentucky, is someone I like a lot. He's
Hard to bring down.
Yes, he's a bowling ball. He's hard to bring down. Very productive at Kentucky. Doesn't bring a lot other than just pure power, but I like him. Kenny McIntosh from Georgia is somebody that I was never really high on, but within the context of him maybe being available in the 6th round, I mean, he'll probably go higher, but
Mhm.
somebody who has soft hands, um, is battle tested, and if you're looking for just that third guy in your depth chart, I think he could make a lot of sense too. Um, and also, if the Dolphins are able to get a fifth or get a 4th or a 5th round pick, I still look at the interior of the offensive line, and Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas. Um, is an interesting story because I was really high on him in 2021. I thought he was going to come out in the draft at the time where we thought Connor Williams was a left guard before he was a center. And I really liked him. He went back surprisingly for 2022, and you just didn't hear anything about him this year. So he kind of got on my radar a little bit later because I thought, "Did this guy have an injury? What happened?" And I watched 4 or 5 of his games about 6 weeks ago, and I was like, "This is the same dude." And Ryan Roberts from Rise and Shine, I thought put it perfectly. He's like, there's not a lot differentiating him from Creed Humphrey.
Mm.
4 year starter. He's not the most nimble guy, but he played in a zone blocking scheme. He's sturdy at the point of attack. He's nasty. He can certainly move over to guard in a pinch. I don't think he gets to the 6th round, but if the Dolphins can grab a pick in the 4th or 5th round, I'd like him. I'd also like a guy named Braden Daniels from Utah, who
Yeah.
played left tackle, right tackle, rolls his hips really, really well, plays above his size and his weight. I think he's got great versatility. If you remember Zach Tom from last year, he's a 4th round
Yeah.
pick for
Oh
Wake
God, I
Forest.
wanted Zach Tom so bad
I did
last year.
too. I did too. And then he was drafted, and then he started against the Dolphins, did a hell of a job
Mm-hmm.
and in that game. And he projects as a starter moving forward for him too. But to me, he's the Zach Tom of this draft, where he's a little bit undersized. He's 6'4", 300 pounds, but he has long arms for his size. Didn't allow a sack at left tackle this past year, and doesn't project there because of his size in the future. But I think you move him down one spot to left guard. I think you could get a really, really good player and a great fit for the scheme.
Now, one position that a lot of Dolphins fans, especially on Twitter, have been targeting in these mock drafts and whatnot, and certainly a position of need for these Miami Dolphins in 2023. Tight end. We haven't talked about it yet. What are your feelings on this year's tight end crop? Most people think it's a pretty deep group. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree with that. It is a deep group, and I don't think I've ever seen 6 or 7 tight ends, you know, that comfortably should go within the first 75 picks, like this
Wow.
year. Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid are expected to go in the first round. Then after that, you've got very little. It's kind of pick your flavor. Where Darnell Washington seems to be the apple of everybody's eye from Georgia. I understand why. Uh, I prefer to look at tight end in the 3rd round and hope somebody falls down there. Now, because the thing with Darnell Washington, look, he's 6'7", 280 pounds. I'm not scratching my head I don't understand why people are interested in this guy. Of course I do. I mean, he's a monster, and he runs a 6'4" or 4.65 and bowls people over. My concern with him is at the next level. Is he just going to be able to maul people like he does at Georgia? He needs to refine his run blocking technique. If he does, you could legitimately have, as been said many times about him, a 6th offensive lineman who can catch.
Mhm.
But 51, I kind of like about 10 to 15 players a little better, and hoping that a tight end falls down, either him or Tucker Kraft, who I'm really high on from South Dakota State. Really looks like a mini fridge out there. Very good inline blocker, but also can make a lot of yards after the catch. Sam Laporte is also a guy that's been rising from Iowa. Not the biggest guy, about 6'3", 245, but technically sound. Also good after the catch. Any of those guys I would love in the 3rd round. 2nd round, I, I wouldn't be irate about. I'd probably prefer somebody different.
Gotcha. At Brian Cat NFL, Cat, it's been awesome to have you. One last question here, and I'll let you get out. I know you're very busy. looking at this draft and looking at last year's draft, since Mike McDaniel's gotten here, we've heard the philosophy. He would love to draft a pass rusher every year, which isn't something we've heard from the Dolphins in some time. I mean, Charles Harris still haunts me. But have you noticed a trend? Have you noticed how maybe they're drafting differently with Brian Flores as coach compared to Mike McDaniel? Because it seems like the big thing with Chris Grier is he kind of gets along with everyone. He wants to be a team player. So I'm just curious if anything in the last year, any of the rumors we're hearing now have caught you off guard in terms of, hey, they're starting to do things a little differently.
Yeah, they're doing things a little differently. And just so you know, my jersey curse isn't just jerseys. To the left of me, I'm a Mizzou fan. I have a signed Charles Harris football.
Oh, no.
No.
But as far as the edge position, it's a really good and a really unbelievably deep edge group. But I'm not going in that direction at all. And the reason for it is, look, you if you draft Jalen Phillips in the middle of the first round, he plays the way he has, and then you trade a first rounder for Bradley Chubb, and then you also bring back Van Ginkel, kind of a different edge player, but on a bargain contract. You sign Malik Reed. You've got Ogbo, who you can't get rid of his contract this year. I'm all about best player available, but there's got to be a pathway to get him on the field. And I don't see that with any of these guys. If you're looking for somebody who can be more of an interior 3-4 guy that can provide a pass rush on third down, you may look at somebody like Keon White from Georgia Tech if he falls, 6'5", 285, older guy. And then from USC, we'd have two Tuas here. So Tua Peloti from USC who was the Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year. Had 22 tackles for loss and 13.5 sacks last year. But really a tweener. But in the 3-4 pass rushing type of role, he would make sense. But if you're talking about any of these other guys, I'm thinking I don't expect Phillips and Chubb to leave the field. So I probably would not go in that direction.
Gotcha. At Brian Cat NFL. Cat, man, it's been great talking with you again. It's always a blast. Please go and everyone follow him on Twitter. The draft knowledge is just spewing out of his ears. Luckily, he's wearing headphones, so we don't see it that much. But Cat, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, man. We greatly appreciate it and appreciate all the knowledge you have about the draft.
Absolutely, guys. I really enjoyed it. Have me on anytime, and best of luck with your show.